Hey guys, Oro here, and I got to play 3 hours of the brand new Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erd Tree. In this video, I'll be talking about my experience, which includes new weapons, areas, bosses, and more. Thank you so much From Software and Bandai Namco for inviting me out to LA to your preview event. You guys are amazing, and I had an absolute blast. Unfortunately, I couldn't record my own footage from this event, so what you're seeing now is pre-recorded by From Software from the areas we experienced. And if you're worried about spoilers, this is all from the very first main area of the DLC. We weren't allowed to go past a certain point. However, I will be covering the entirety of what we got to experience. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The first thing I noticed was that they actually patched the Bandai Namco flashbang loading screen to a black background instead of a white, which is a welcome change. When the game loaded up, we were able to pick from 6 different pre-built characters: Warrior, Knight, and Sorcerer, and type A or B of each. Warrior was a strength build, Knight was a dex, and Sorcerer was int. Each of them were level 150 with maxed out weapons and talismans, which gave me the impression that this is around the level they expect most players to enter the DLC. Each build also featured new DLC armor sets, and had tons of new weapons and spells for us to try while we were playing. Of course, I had to pick the Knight, which had armor similar to the Knight that appeared in the trailer. When I loaded in, I found myself next to Miquella's Cocoon at Mohg's Palace, the entrance to the DLC. If you guys don't know, before entering the DLC, you have to defeat Radahn and Mohg. Now, because they defeated both on this character, there was a new NPC waiting for me there. I immediately recognized her as the Knight from the trailer. She claimed her name was Lady Letta, and urged me to touch the hand to get whisked away to the land of shadow in search of Miquella. In typical Souls protag fashion, I did the only thing we always do: touch things we probably shouldn't. I was then teleported to the lands of shadow, also known as the Shadow Realm, Jimbo. I walked out of a small alcove I spawned in and took in the beautiful view right before sitting down at the very first site of grace. I noticed 2 brand new menu options, which ended up being the new damage scaling feature unique to the DLC. The first one is called Shadow Realm Blessing, and to quote directly from the game, Scadutree Blessing Fragments bolster the recipient's abilities to deal and negate damage, but has no influence outside the realm of shadow. What this means is that the more Scadutree Blessing Fragments you collect and burn at the site of grace, the more powerful your character will become in the Shadow Realm. The fragments are scattered throughout the DLC to reward and encourage exploration. The higher the upgrade, the more fragments required. I instantly thought of the insane challenge runs that people are going to do with 0 Scadutree blessings in the DLC. The second option is called Revered Spirit Ash Blessing, which, quote-unquote, bolsters both Summon Spirits and Spectral Steed's abilities to deal and negate damage, but has no influence outside the realm of shadow. This one was for Spirit Ashes and Torrent, a totally separate resource. After leaving the site of grace, I immediately started trying out the new weapons. There are 8 new weapon types so far in the DLC: throwing blades, light great swords, backhand blades, great katanas, hand-to-hand, beast claws, perfume bottles, and thrusting shields. There was also a set of unique throwable weapons called Smith Script weapons. Weapons that had seemingly normal movesets, aside from their unique R2s that threw the entire weapon. There was an axe, great hammer, and spear. A small exception to this was the Smith Script dagger that was the throwing blade. I absolutely loved all the new weapon types. Trying them out was a highlight, but my absolute favorites were the Dryleaf Arts, the hand-to-hand moveset, the Great Katana, which was a Great Katana, and Milady, which was the light greatsword. Very, very fun, and it just really felt fresh. It helped make the game feel like a whole brand new experience. It's worth noting that I found a weapon with a completely new moveset, even though it had an old weapon type, which means that there might be even more unique weapons. I was told there are over 100 new weapons in the DLC. And like a massive nerd that I am, I wrote down all the exact descriptions for the new Ashes of War that I'll be going over in another video. But for now, let's get back to the playthrough. I immediately ran through the fields and started exploring as much as I possibly could. I started out by going to the west, where I found a beautiful field of flowers with the dreaded blue worms. I was shocked to find out that they're actually friends until you attack them. However, at which point they turn red and start beating your ass, Ocarina of Time chicken style. Immediately after fucking around and finding out, a giant gargoyle bird started attacking me alongside them. And me being the coward I am, immediately started running away down some stairs into a nearby catacomb that went straight into a fog gate, where I was greeted by yet another asshole, the Black Jail Knight, a knight NPC from the gameplay trailer with the rapid fire crossbow. I was soon to find out that I had made a grave mistake, and I probably should have taken my chance at the wormies. He used a great sword and a unique Ash of War, which seemed like a sped up vacuum slice, with a follow-up slash that had insane forward momentum. His rapid-fire crossbow's weapon art started off with a slow fire rate, then quickly ramped up into a machine gun of death, similar to a chain gun. He basically one-shot me with every single attack he did, but after a few deaths, I finally beat him, and he dropped his weapon and armor set, the Great Sword of Solitude and the Armor of Solitude. This is when I noticed a brand new feature. There was a recent item tab and a yellow exclamation mark next to new items. Both of these were toggleable in the options and a welcome quality of life addition to the game. After that fun encounter, I went back to Warm Hell and started heading towards the center of the map, which I found a small ruin with some weak shadow enemies. They died in a few hits and were totally pathetic for the most part, until one of them actually hit me and did half my health. It was at this exact moment I knew that the DLC was scaled for higher levels, and realized that the build they gave me only had 50 vigor. I quickly pulled up the map to teleport to Renala, and was surprised to see that the DLC map was completely separate from the base game map. There was a button to toggle between the two. I also discovered a new map feature, Summoning Pool List, which toggled all the summoning pools that were activated on the character. Even after respecing to 60 vigor with Renala, I was still taking extreme amounts of damage from everything. I made it my goal to try to find more Scadutri Blessing fragments to upgrade my character. In the distance, I saw the flaming giant from the trailer and immediately went to beat his ass. He stomped me into the dirt and killed me in a single hit. So that didn't go well. After respawning, I noticed a yellow rune in the distance, which I recognized from the trailer. Around it was a site of grace with 2 NPCs.
Another, treading the heels of Miquella. Then, as that woman would surely say, we are in our purposes well aligned. But understand, your kind are not forgiven. The Earth Tree is my people's enemy. By Marika long betrayed, set aflame. I believe Miquella's apologies when he says our delivery will come, but never will I see your kind as worthy.
One of them introduced themselves as Redmane Freya, who fought alongside Radahn, and the other didn't mention his name at all, but he was apparently a Hornsent. They shared with me that they were all followers of Miquella, following in his footsteps. The glowing rune was actually Miquella's cross, and touching it revealed the text, "I abandon here the first of the flesh of my body." What does this mean? I don't know. Miquella's gross? Ask Vadi or something. A Hornsent NPC gave me a map that marked 3 golden crosses, said to be Miquella's footprints. After speaking with the NPCs, I noticed an item nearby. It ended up being a Scadutri fragment, which allowed me to sit at the site of grace and upgrade my blessing to +1. I then pulled up my character stats, and my AR and damage negation were now gold and boosted significantly. Out of curiosity, I went back to the main game, and sure enough, the gold numbers were gone. So if you run around and explore and grab all the blessings, your game will be a lot easier. After resting at the Grace, I headed even more west through a small path that led me to a giant set of stairs. Next to these stairs were 2 more NPCs I went to speak with. One of the NPCs was called Ansbach and told me he had worked for Moog, which is a massive red flag in my opinion, but what do I know? He told me there were 6 crosses in total. I then spoke to his companion, Moore, who was a very charming character that ended up being a merchant. He sold some crafting materials, pickled livers, and well-pickled turtleneck, which ended up being stronger versions of their base game counterparts. And in case you forgot, livers grant a boost to damage negation, depending on the type, and turtlenecks grant a boost to stamina recovery. The last thing he sold was a note that talked about sealed spirit springs. It said that you should look for stacked stones nearby and topple them. Spirit strings allow you to jump with torrent, so this is extremely helpful tip. After talking to them, I ran up the big-ass stairs to open a big-ass door, which led me to an Indiana Jones temple of bullshit, where I got ambushed by like 7 scorpions, fought my way through them to the next side of Grace, which ended up being the entrance to the very first legacy dungeon, Belurat Tower Settlement. The boss of this area was the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, one of the first bosses you encounter in the DLC. Defeating him grants you his remembrance and his massive lion head helmet. The lion helmet granted 2 strength and 2 dexterity to its wearer. On your playthrough, be sure to go back and chat with the NPC in the area while wearing the lion's head for a fun surprise. The Divine Beast Remembrance lets you choose between a talisman or an Ash of War. The talisman boosts quote-unquote Storm, which I'm assuming means Ashes of War like Stormblade, Storm Assault, Stormcaller, but can't quite be sure. The Ash of War is basically a super-powered Hoarfrost Stomp that can be charged. Anyways, after clearing the area, I went north and found a new dungeon, the Belurat Jail. I had recognized the dungeon from the trailer, but it was unlike anything I've ever seen in the base game. It had this eerie blue hue, and it was filled with tons and tons of living jars. Little did I know that the meaning this time was quite literal, as the warrior guts inside the jar came to life and snuck up behind me. It was absolutely terrifying. They were disgusting and grotesque, and instantly recognizable as something only FromSoft would create. In a weird way, they looked like really fucked up hermit crabs with the jars on their back. The whole dungeon was filled with these horrifying abominations as they hid as jars inside the environment and tried to sneak up on you in hallways and tiny platforms. While going through the dungeon, I noticed an elevator that took me up to a secret room with a great jar helmet. A jar helm that was massive and quote-unquote boosted all size jars. I also found a crafting book to create a hefty cracked pot to throw at enemies. Finally, the boss of this hell dungeon was demi-human Swordmaster Ans, which instantly reminded me of Yoda. He was super small and nimble, jumped all over the damn place. He used Dark Souls 3 Aquamarine Dagger, and he Sekiro deflected my attacks. I can't make this up. He beat my ass for a long time until I realized he had no poise. Then I just started spamming and stunlocked him to death. When I finally beat him, he dropped his Spirit Ashes, which allowed you to summon him in battle. I then exited the dungeon, straight out to a lake, where I found a very familiar foe, a Bone Dragon. As cool as it was, it ended up being a 1/1 dragon reskin from the base game, which was a tad disappointing. He dropped a dragon heart when defeated. Next, I traveled through the thick fog to the north, only to find yet another catacomb, the aptly named Fog Rift Catacombs. Inside, I found lots of nasty ceiling traps with massive spikes 10 times bigger than the base game. I also encountered a brand new type of imp that I immediately hated just as much as the normal imps. There were also some mages spamming spells at me while I was trying to dodge the imps and the ceiling traps, which was super fun. But eventually, I got through it. The boss of this catacomb was the Death Knight, Godwyn's loyal knight. After defeating him, I received his weapon, Death Knight's twin axes, that had the most insane weapon art. It started with a teleport, followed by a spinning slash that had absolutely batshit movement. I was extremely excited and worried at the same time while considering the possibilities in PvP. Continuing on from this catacomb, I went south to the massive bridge, which led me to the next legacy dungeon, Ensis Castle. The boss here was R'Lana, Twin Moon Knight. Yes, R'Lana, not Renala. She dual-wielded swords and was extremely nimble. Defeating her gave you her remembrance, and you could choose between her 2 swords or a spell. After reading some item descriptions, it's clear that this was Renala's sister who chose to side with Mesmer. After defeating her, we weren't allowed to continue past her boss room, so I went back to the bridge and headed south, where I found yet another dungeon, the ruined lava forge, which I also recognized from the gameplay trailer. This dungeon had another familiar enemy, the magma worm, but it wasn't the final boss. In fact, there didn't seem to be a final boss in this dungeon at all. Just a legendary weapon at the very end called the Anvil Hammer. It was around this time that I was warned that we only had 10 minutes left, so I started hauling ass. I ran to the hills to the west, where I found a man dying on the floor, warning me not to progress any further. Of course, I completely ignored his ass and ran straight into an NPC invasion. I was absolutely shocked when I saw the invader's name, Ancient Dragon Man. And sure enough, he looked exactly like the dragon forms we came to know and love from the Souls series. This form was more like Dark Souls 2 armored form than anything. And it might just be an armor set, but it looked incredible. And the second I defeated him, I was told to set my controller down, which is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, considering this is the most fun I've had in a very long time, maybe since Elden Ring came out. I instantly knew that this DLC was going to be something special, and that even with the 3 hours we had, I barely scratched the surface of what was no doubt another masterpiece by From Software. So that's it. That was my absolutely incredible experience with Shadow of the Erdtree. A quick shout out to my friends at Distortion 2 and Larksa, who helped me put everything together. Honestly, the most fun I had was finding out new things and freaking out about it with everyone. And now I'm thankful I get to share my experience with you guys and do the exact same thing. I hope you guys are all excited as I am for what will no doubt be one of the greatest DLCs of all time. Be sure to stay tuned for the next video, where I'll be going over every single item I found in the DLC, including new weapons, armor, spells, talismans, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more exclusive Shadow of the Erdtree content coming real soon. And thank you so much for watching, guys.